The Afterlife by Gary Soto, Chapter 4, page 43. I felt the need to say goodbye to my parents and to my Uncle Richard and Cousin Eddie, plus friends, distant friends, and every kind soul I met on the street. Then there was my track coat, Mr. Morales, who was just out of Fresno State and could run faster than any of his distance runners. Maybe I could find out where he lived and run over there. Until now, I never understood what goodbye, adios, see you later, alligator meant. I've always assumed that I would go to school in the morning and come back in the afternoon, and things would be the same. Now, I knew different. I left Rachel's house disturbed because my left foot was gone, and because I knew that in time, 3 days, 4 days, I would disappear. I felt lighter, and the wind picked up, and like it or not, I tossed westward again, back down to downtown and the Fulton Mall. I peered into the boutique that I had visited earlier, and the girl, what was her name, was still reading People in Espanol. A different issue, but still speeding along and taking in the fashions. There were no customers. She had to find ways to kill time. I guess you could think about how to prop up those drooping candles or put a little color back in those plastic flowers. I straddled a splintery bench and listened to the spines of water splashing from the fountain. Sparrows flew through my ribs, and a pigeon the color of cement pecked at the sidewalk. I realized that I was neither hungry nor thirsty, and that the Mexicano pushing a paleta cart didn't draw me to his tinkling bell. Two children were hacking away at plates of peanut brittle. That sweet candy didn't tease me either. In the distance, St. John's Cathedral, mighty clock bonged 1 o'clock. Its single note absorbed all the sounds in the air, and then vanished. I felt a sadness for myself, but had to grin. I suddenly remembered Rachel. I could have followed her into the shower and gotten an eyeful, Chihuahua. To watch her undo one button after another and step out of her pajamas, sin vergüenza, sin vergüenza. Still, I wagged my head and told myself, you had your chance. I brooded as my thoughts swung from the image of Rachel soaping up her body to the image of my casket. I had a sense that my funeral was going to be at St. John's, where I was baptized, had my first Holy Communion, and was confirmed in my Primo's hand-me-down suit. If I had not grown too tall, maybe I could be buried in that suit. No sense wasting money on clothes no one would see, I figured. How many days does it take to dress the dead? I wondered. I buried my face in my hands and scrubbed my face. I wanted to wake up from this nightmare. Pitched in that darkness, I had to wonder about what follows death. Do we come back? Once you lived it, is that it? Does heaven exist? Hell with its thermostat all the way turned up? I shivered at the thought of always having to stay in a grave, your own private jail. Enough, I told myself. Get those images out of your head. I watched the few shoppers in the mall, none of them happy about what they had bought, and headed westward. My shoulders slumped. I walked painlessly through a train that was hauling new cars. Where was the train headed? Oakland? Sacramento? I considered hopping one and going until I was in Oregon or even Canada, but I hesitated. I followed its red light until it disappeared on the horizon. Now that I was dead, I had to grow up. I had to confess my first real sin. My grandmother was buried at a cemetery on East Belmont, where the vineyards and orchards started. I took long, bouncing strides towards the cemetery. My grandfather had died 6 years ago of cancer, they told me, though it could have been anything because what did I know? At the time, I was 11, a Moscoso kid who loved to play and eat candy. I was determined to repent to my grandfather about something I had stolen. It was a cigarette lighter, which I had snagged from his pants pocket and traded for $10 in dimes with a kid across the street. I located grandfather's grave immediately because I remembered that he'd been buried near a diseased tree that had been cut down. I perched myself on the tree stump and said a little prayer over his flowerless grave. His headstone simply read Maria Jesus Chavez, 1931 to 1997. A single rose was etched into its polished granite. Grandfather, I called. It's me, Chewy. A distant tree rustled an answer for him. I swallowed. I stole your lighter, I confessed. Somewhere a gardener was starting up a mower. I also snagged some pennies, Grandpa. The mower stopped, but a mower in the next cemetery started up. I floated off the tree stump. You probably knew that I took it, I added. I clearly remember going through his pocket and pulling out not only a cigarette lighter, but also 10 pennies, dark as his work-weathered skin. I remembered running outside the house and meeting up with the neighbor kid, Jonathan, something or other. He liked the lighter so much that he went inside and stole 2 rolls of dimes worth of $10. He stole the dimes, I think, from his dad, but he lied and said they were his. All I remember was the rate of those rolls and dimes and how slowly I peeled the paper off like they were lifesavers. I bought candy for 2 weeks and ate it alone in a tree in my backyard. Grandfather, I'm the one, I confessed in my heart. You know, the lighter, the pennies. I recalled how Jonathan used the lighter to start a small fire in his backyard. We were both 11, selfish beyond words and guilty. How many candy bars smudged my dirty face? Grandpa, I whispered, how is it down there? I smoothed the grass in front of his tombstone and told him that I was sorry that I was dead and maybe I would be with him. I could have cried hot dime-sized tears. I would have. But what could I do but trace his name with my finger? I put my hands through his headstone and dipped my right arm all the way to my shoulder into the moist lawn. This scared me. I thought I might touch his bony chest, shredded to almost nothing from years and years of rain. Ah, Grandpa, I sobbed. I could swear that I felt his hand tugging on mine. Was Grandpa trying to bring me down? I noticed at the next grave a bee trying to suck on an artificial flower. It seemed real, the flower. I floated over to an open grave. It was dark, and a few roots showed from the sides of the walls. I jumped into the grave and looked skyward, wondering if this is what the dead see for eternity. A bird flew past, and then another. I'm sorry, Grandpa, I whispered. Dirt from the sides of the grave crumbled. From the graveyard, I returned to town, pushing hard because the wind was blowing against my steps. It was getting dark. Some headlights of passing cars were on, and it was by this light that I noticed my other foot was gone, and a portion of my left hand, the one that I had used to trace Grandfather's name. Nah, I thought. I held up my hand as if something foreign to me. I tightened my stomach and forced myself to continue. Wind or no wind, I was going to see my parents.